Hi, this is Shel Talmy. You're listening to Retrospectives with John Broughton at KC Radio 97.7 FM.
Probably not.
Probably not. Just to begin, tell us about your beginnings in production and before you made the trek to the United Kingdom.
Well, I was an engineer in Los Angeles, and the guy I worked for was English, come over and done extremely well, and I was 21. I thought it'd be a nice idea to go see Europe for a few weeks before life passed me by, and so I intended to spend most of my time in England because of the language, obviously, and took the precaution of taking some contacts with me just for the hell of it, because I thought if I could work there for 3-4 weeks and make some bread, that would help, because I didn't have a whole lot. And first place I walked into was Decca via contact, and basically, not to put too fine a point on it, I bullshitted my way into a job. I reeled up a string of hits I hadn't done, and they said, "Great, you start today." So that was that.
Can you remember your very first time in the recording studio and the first production you were involved with?
Yeah, sort of. You got to keep in mind that things were just a wee bit more were easier to operate in those days. This is a 3-track studio, and with a patchboard and a 3-track machine and all that kind of stuff. And I did my first solo session 3 days after I started. He kind of like sink or swim, and it was I remember it was about a 12-piece band with horns and all that kind of stuff, and that all went fine, and I was feeling pretty good about everything right up until the time when they wanted me to edit a piece of a take and replace it with something else, and this is something I had only the bare rudiments of, and I must have sweated about 2 quarts, but I actually accomplished it. So that was my first session.
Being over in England when you were very much in the right place at the right time. Were you conscious of the musical explosion that was about to happen over there when you went over?
Oh, I was really there before it happened. I was on Kings Road, lived right around Kings Road. There was probably, I would estimate, 300 to 400 people hanging out, who weekends, party night, we used to arrive en masse, and then the whole damn thing exploded, and yeah, I was aware that things were happening, and it was a very exciting time.
Do you think you can be born with a good ear for a hit record, or is that something that develops with time and experience?
No, I think you got it or you don't. I don't think there's anything you can learn.
Yeah, it's just a natural instinct.
Yeah, I think it's sort of probably in the same category as being able to wiggle your ears. Either you can or you can't.
Yeah. I guess the two bands that people link you with the most are the Kinks and the Who, mainly because of the classic recordings you made with them. You really got me for the Kinks, a prime example of that. It had such an aggressive, full-on sound. Did they express to you that was the sound they were trying to achieve when they came to you?
No, nobody in England at that time was really doing that. It was with all due immodesty. All that sound was really mine. And I had experimented before I came as an engineer, singly and with the guy who owned the studio, on how to achieve better sound and how to do better isolation and a whole lot of stuff. And so this is what I wanted to hear because that's what I liked. So that's what I came out with. And I made when I got to England, I thought all the records putting it in English were extremely polite, and I wanted more aggression, which is a good word, and that's what I wound up with.
Yeah. As the Kinks developed through the years and you kept working with them, they developed what you would call a very English sound. Their Englishness really came to the fore. Being an American yourself, was it a challenge to capture that Englishness in the recording process?
No, really not. I had virtually no problems. I mean, I always say I'm bilingual. I speak both English and American, and uh, no, I picked up on all the English stuff immediately. It was extremely interesting. Um, it was fun to learn. I learned Cockney rhyming, slang. I did all that kind of stuff, and Ray was one of the great writers for his time. Certainly in terms of expressing what the times were in as the way people felt and what people were doing and all that kind of stuff. He was brilliant.
In general terms, through the years, how much did you involve yourself in the actual arrangements of the songs in the studio?
I I did all the arrangements. I
All of
mean, I
them.
worked with them, but basically all the arrangements are mine. I mean, they used to come in with basically Ray, for example, came in with songs. It was an extremely prolific writer. Came in and played me songs either on a piano or a guitar, and he might have written a dozen songs the night before, and we'd go through them, and I'd say, yeah, that needs more work, and that, yeah, or yeah, that's great, let's do that, and then we rehearse,
Mm.
and I never went into the studio without rehearsing, and so that the arrangements were approximately 90% set, because I always try to allow something wonderful to happen, during the actual recording.
Working with the different bands and artists that you work with through the years, did you have to vary your method and procedure of production according to the artist or band and their personality?
I think that's probably almost obvious because, yeah, you really have to be adaptable, and working with band and band dynamics is in many ways doing the same thing as a psychologist does. You're really you're doing a lot more of that at a lot of times than you are producing, because the egos are rampant and so individual that you got to do your best to try and make the whole thing mesh.
Yeah. Working with the Who, just to pick one song out at random, My Generation, when you first heard that, how much did it differ from the song that we heard in the final production?
It was basically just him doing a demo, and I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. When we were rehearsing, and as what I assumed, as I think I'm fairly sure was a joke at the time, uh, Daltrey did some of the stuttering. I said, "Yeah, keep it in. That works." So. And the BBC banned it, because it was a slap in the face to stutterers, and which of course ensured that it got to where it got to. So the moment they did that, so.
Did you remain a fan of the work that the Kinks and the Who produced after your involvement with them ended? Did you find yourself listening to their records in later years, thinking, "Oh, I would have done this differently, or would have done that differently"?
Well, I think yeah, again, that's fairly obvious. I think every producer would do that, and yes, of course I did, and of course, and in many ways, I thought I could do it a lot better.
Mm.
Um, and certainly, I mean, with the Kinks, I guess in particular, they really did not have much after I stopped producing them in terms of hits. They had one major hit, which is Lola, and that's really it. So yeah, I think my contribution became kind of self-evident as time went on.
You worked with David Bowie in a very early stage of his career. He was still known as David Jones in those days. Could you see
I did.
any indication of the artist that he would develop into?
I thought he was brilliant. I thought he was going to make it extremely big, and we were probably 6 years ahead of the market. In fact, we were about 6 years ahead of the market. Everything that we did uh, at that time, it started happening for him about 6 years later. And it's unfortunate. I wish the hell that we had been on time, but it didn't work out like that.
Yeah.
And he's terrific. He's a very, very bright guy, by the way.
Can you recall any particular production of yours when your ear for a hit let you down, a song that you were sure would be a hit but just didn't eventuate?
Yeah, there's one I thought, but I did a I did a single with a guy named Chris White, who we had a hit with a song called Spanish Wine in the 70s, and I did a follow-up. I thought it was going to be a smash, and it did nothing. And I really expected it to, but it was one of those things. It didn't happen.
Yeah. These days, when you've probably got more time to reflect on your career, have you ever pondered what direction your career may have taken had you stayed in the United States and not got involved in that whole British music explosion?
Oh, yeah, sure, I certainly do, and think I think there's first of all, there's no question I would have still been a record producer, because I did have right before I left, I was offered a 4-single deal by a very good label, and I said I've already booked my tickets. I'll be back in 6 weeks, which I didn't plan to be. 17 years later, it's when I finally got back. So, yeah, I think I would have been a record producer. Yes, and I will tell you right now, yes, I'm equal enough to tell you that I would have had hits here, yes.
Yeah. No doubt about that. There was recently a poll taken here in Australia which voted the Easybeats Friday on My Mind as the greatest Australian song of all time. You produced it. Tell us about how
Yes.
you came involved with the Easybeats.
Well, they came to me, and this was after I had several hits. Mike Vaughan, followed closely by Ted Albert, and they just nothing. There wasn't anything they couldn't do. There wasn't enough they couldn't do for me to take on the band, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I liked the band. I liked what I heard, and signed a contract with Ted Albert, and worked with the guys. In fact, my then secretary reminded me several years later that because I didn't like the material that there was there at the time, and they used to go home and write, come up to the office about every Friday, and we go through the stuff, and I keep sending them back until I heard Friday in My Mind, which is several weeks later. And I said, okay, that's the one, let's do it. And it was, as far as I was concerned, and most of the other people in the studio, it was going to be a hit. It was one of those naturals, it just sounded like it should be a hit.
Yeah.
And I should add at this point, you being in Australia, that I was still, at that point, naive enough to think that people in the business were going to be honest and straightforward and do what they said they were going to do. And it never occurred to me that I would be running into slime balls, as I eventually did, because Ted Albert was supposed to be, of course, paying me my royalties. I never collected a fucking penny. So there you go.
Is that right?
Yep.
And it clashes with management, probably the curse of the producer, aren't they?
I'm sorry, what?
Clashes with management is probably the number one curse of the producer's job, I guess, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I never had problems with the band. I always had problems with management who are basically no talent scum, not to put too fine a point on it. And Albert, I mean, yeah, I could have sued and all that kind of stuff, but he was in Australia and it wasn't worth it. So.
Yeah.
So there you go.
What about record companies? How did you find them to deal with over the years?
Oh, record companies are as bad, if not worse. I mean, I had 2 major lawsuits with both Polygram and MCA here on my Who contract, which was as explicit as it could be about how I'm supposed to be collecting my royalties, and both of them decided they weren't going to pay me. I had it took me 7 years to win the one in the UK which I finally did, and fortunately, there a loser pays bills, but it cost me a lot of money to pursue it. And they do it, of course, because most people wouldn't be as persistent and wouldn't have the bread to do it in the first place. I did. And, here, which things happen much quicker here, but it took me a year and a half, and I did have one of the major lawyers handling it for me, so that went a hell of a lot easier. So, but if anybody tells you wonderful things about record companies, they're lying to you. It's not true.
Were problems with record companies one of the motivating factors behind you setting up your own label eventually?
Well, I set up my own label, and everything was going fine. I was actually making some money. This was with Phillips, and they screwed me big time, and made it so impossible that there was no way that I could continue, because they kept piling charges up that weren't weren't in the contract. But if I had to fight it, I'd be spending all my time in court. I just folded. I basically folded the labels. No point.
Yeah. Just harking back to the Easybeats, Friday on My Mind's probably the first Australian song to have that real anthem-like quality. Was that the feel you were trying to achieve in the studio with that song?
No, and nor did I try for an anthem with my generation. They were two great songs that if they turn out to be anthems, all the better. It was, I'm happy about that. But no, certainly nobody came into the studio thinking, I'm going to do an anthem today. No, it didn't work out like that.
The Easybeats were not your only Australian connection. You also produced Axiom, which
Axiom, that was the drag. That was we actually did what I thought was a damn good album. And then they broke up, and of course Warner's decided to screw it. They put it out, and the band broke up about 2 weeks before the album came out. And of course Warner's did nothing with it, so that was the end of that.
Yeah, there's a real shame that they were a fantastic band. They really were.
Yeah, well, and of course they went on to Glenn went on to Little River Band, and they all did reasonably well, and it was a damn good band. I liked the songs a lot. And I think if they had not broken up, and if Warner's had promoted it, then I think it was a very good chance that record would have done a lot.
Yeah. The band Creation was one you had involvement with, who had a bit of a following in Europe, but nowhere else. Did you expect more success for that band?
I thought they were going to be superstars like the Who, and in fact, there's another band. If I'm talking about band dynamics, I did everything I could think of to try to stop them from breaking up, because I just made a huge deal for them in the States after they had number ones in Germany and Holland and various other places, and high in the charts in England, and I thought they were going to be major, which they should have been, and they broke up, and that was the end of that. They in fact do have a huge cult following here in the States, and in fact I've made a ton of money with them because a lot of their the tracks I did have either been in commercials or were have been in feature films.
That's right. You produced Man for a Man after a major change in that band's lineup. Did you feel a pressure on you to come up with something that would continue that band's run of success? Despite
no, I don't. I brought them with Paul Jones into Decca, and they turned me down after I did demos with them, and that actually is one of the reasons why I stopped doing things exclusively for Decca, as I was an independent producer, and it was the reason I actually went to Who with the Kinks. And so after Paul Jones left and Mike Dabo became the lead singer, then the manager Jerry Vaughn came back to me and said, "Can you do anything with him?" I said, "Okay, I'll give it a shot." And so we had a bunch of hits, which was fun.
What about some of the sessions?
I feel pressure. You wanted to know that? No, I felt no pressure. I thought,
no.
Hey, I'll do what I can. If I can do it, fine. If I can't do it, fine.
And it worked. Yeah. How about some of the session musicians you used on your productions? Who are some of that bring the fondest memories to you?
Well, I mean, my two favorite were Nicky Hopkins and Jimmy Page, obviously.
Mm.
But people like Clem Gattini and Bobby Graham and Big Jim Sullivan and those probably. Who else? Herbie Flowers on bass. I have some really good people that I liked a lot.
So was there anything in particular that triggered your return to the United States? How did you know the time was right to make that move back home?
I actually knew it was pretty much over in the early '70s and was having too good a time and just hung on. I think I hung on. In fact, I know I hung on much too long. I should have gone back in the early '70s, and I think I would have done a lot more than I wound up doing. I got kind of indolent, to say the least, and involved in all kinds of other stuff. I had a book publishing company. I started writing novels. I did all kinds of other stuff that sounded like fun at the time. So
Yeah.
Anyway, I stayed on, and then I thought, yes, it really is time to go back, and I did. I went back home.
Looking back, is there any particular artist or band that you never worked with that perhaps you really would have liked to, and that you felt you could have really enhanced their work in a certain way, in a certain direction they never went?
And enhanced, I'm not sure. Enhanced, there's certainly a whole lot of bands I would like to have done, like let's see, CCR, the Eagles, Queen. There's a bunch I'd like to have worked with. Yes, that didn't happen. There's some wonderful artists out there. I would like to have done Led Zeppelin. I mean, hell, I damn near discovered Jimmy Page. So
Yeah.
I wish he'd come to me, but he hadn't. He didn't.
In all of your work over the years, was there any one particular golden rule of production that you always made sure that you stuck to right through your career in the studio?
Yes, I suppose the fact that I am, and I've always been a hands-on producer. I'm there from day one till finishing day with every phase of the operation. It's choosing material, doing arrangements, recording, mixes, mastering, etc., all the way through the end. I think I always, as an absolute rule of thumb, would do.
Yeah. And before I let you go, Shel, what's keeping you busy these days?
Well, I don't know. Probably the easy answer is not enough, because music business is not what it used to be, and I can tell you that believe it or not, I still get offers to do bands, and I just haven't been able to convince myself to lock myself away with a band for any length of time, because none of them that I've heard have had songs enough that have wanted me to really get in and do it, and that's the major situation I'm running to in the last 20 years. I think we're a real fallow period here. Is that there is a real dearth of songwriters. I'm not wild about virtually any of the bands I've heard. They're not doing the kind of music that says anything to me, and I find that most of the stuff they're doing are retreads of stuff that's been done before, and with tons of repetitious chords and nonsensical lyrics, and it's just it's not fun. It's not what I like. Let's put it that way. Obviously, it sells, so I can hardly put it down. And there are people who love this, and so good luck to them.
Yeah, but I get it, at your stage, at the stage of your career that you're at now, you're probably in a position where you can look for a quality of work rather than a quantity of work.
Oh, totally. No, I don't have to do anything, which is a nice position to be in. And I wish there were some things that would come, my way that would be fun to do, but I really haven't had much of that.
Yeah. Shel, thank you so much for your time and being so generous with your time today. It's been an absolute honour to speak with you, and thank you for bringing us.
Well, that's it. Where's this? You didn't tell me. What's this going into? I have no idea.
Oh, radio.
Oh, it's for radio. Oh, okay, fine.
It'll...
And all right, good enough. And Good. Well, I'm delighted that my comments about Ted Albert will get aired. Good.
They'll be here. Don't worry about that.
Good.
And
Glad to hear it.
thank you for bringing us some of the most memorable
Okay.
music ever.
Thank you.
All
Okay.
the best.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Thanks. You too. Bye now.